Welcome to South Coast Working, the voice of working people and those who continue to build the South Coast each and every day. From the docks to the mills to the classrooms to the roadways, working people add a voice and life to southeastern Massachusetts. Brought to you by the UMass Dartmouth Arnold M. Dubin Labor Education Center.
Welcome back to the South Coast Working Podcast. I'm Elena Eberwein. Today's podcast will be chatting with the outgoing president of the Massachusetts AFL-CIO, Steven Tolman. Tolman is a leader in labor and has been for many years. He got his start at the railroads in the 1970s, has served in the legislature, and was elected as president of the Massachusetts AFL-CIO in 2011. We spoke to him in late September as he reflected on his storied career, achievements, and what he has planned for retirement. Let's get into it.
Good afternoon. My name is Steven Tolman. I'm the president of the Massachusetts AFL-CIO. I'm from Brighton, Mass., and I'm out of what was originally the Brotherhood of Railway and Airline Clerks, and then became Transportation Communication International Union, and then we have merged with the Machinist Union, the Fighting Machinists.
So tell us a little bit about the Massachusetts AFL-CIO. What is it, and what exactly does your day-to-day look like?
Well, I would say that the Massachusetts AFL-CIO, and I often will ask people, do you know what the AFL-CIO stands for? And you will see the eyes roll back and people know it's a list of long acronyms. And I will inadvertently say everything that is good about America or everything that is right about America, because that's really what the AFL, American Federation of Labor, Congress of Industrial Organization, is. We are the umbrella organization of labor. And so we are the political and legislative arm of labor, and we work with all of the different unions. And my real role, I believe, is to keep all of the unions educated and informed about each other's struggles. Because when we understand each other's struggles, it's so much easier to be involved in it, just rather than thinking because we're union, we have to be together. So we need to be educating our different affiliates. And when I say, do you know what the AFL-CIO stands for? I mean it, that it does stand for everything that is right about America.
Tell us a little bit about your history. When did you become president here?
It was October 5th, 2011. I was still in the Senate, and I didn't resign from the Senate till October 13th, which will incidentally be my last day with the AFL-CIO, October 13th. I was really, touched by the greatest labor leader that ever lived. I point to my national president, Fred Kroll, who in 1976 took a somewhat corrupt union challenging the retiring president's son for national president. And Fred was a very active trade unionist. He won the election. They beat him up so bad he was hospitalized. And when he got out of the hospital, he basically said to the leaders, we can do this two ways. You all leave, no problems. You stay, we go to court. They left. He then is the sole leader of a really good union at the time, Brotherhood of Railway and Airline Clerks. We had 200,000 members in the 60s. And with the introduction of the computer in the early 70s, unfortunately, we were annihilated. I mean, when you talk, about the computer coming in, the railway clerk was a pencil and a piece of paper. That's what they did in commuter rails and in freight railroads or in passenger railroads. That's what the clerks did, but it was really annihilated with the computer.
And now, can you give us a little bit of a snapshot of your professional history and sort of what led to becoming president and now where you are today?
Yeah, I worked for the railroad for 23 years. I was a union rep for 20 of them. And when I say inspired by the greatest labor leader, I really mean that. The saddest part of the story is that Fred died in 1981 at the young age of 45, and he was the youngest guy ever elected to the executive council of the National AFL-CIO. he would have taken over when Labor had a big void because George Meany was the president for like 50 years. And this was the guy that a lot of people were hedging would take the labor movement into the new era with vim and vigor and brains. And it was all pulled back when he got sick and succumbed to leukemia on July 30th, 1981. And so he inspired me in many different ways. And I believe that his inspiration had a great impact on me. Clearly, your mom and dad and your family, whether it's your siblings, you always grow from something like that. But this guy put it kind of right down, and simply he said, when I'm a new local chairman for the railroad, he said, the role of a union representative is not just in the workplace. And kind of got my attention. I'm saying, wait, I just got elected. I'm thinking workplace issues, workplace. And he said it's in the communities, it's in the schools, it's in the churches. He said it's in the political parties. And he said generally the Democratic Party, this is in the 70s. He said, but sometimes the Republican Party. And there was a large hiss across the crowd because people knew that the Republicans really weren't the party of the people. And then he said, it's in the AFL-CIO, it's in the Central Labor Councils. And he paused and said, you have to balance all that activity by being a good parent. And when he said that, it just all made sense to me. I got goosebumps literally from my toes to my earlobes. He owned me. That was the recipe to be a good union leader. And Fred Kroll described it with passion like I'd never heard before. I literally was electrified and just loved this guy and loved the way he spoke and believed in him. And sadly, things changed when he passed. But what never changed was what he instilled in me, and that was the actual recipe of that as a union rep, you do for others. You find challenges. You stand up against injustice. I guess I should probably clarify that. So I did the 23 years on the railroad. Then I got elected to the legislature. And it was kind of like we had talked about union members running for legislature. It was before the 2000 for those that would remember that campaign from John Sweeney, I think it was. But in 1990, I had moved from my hometown to the next town, from Watertown to Brighton, and the seat opened up for state rep. So I ran for it. I had no business running for it because there were probably people who grew up in the community that were active politically. And it was a woman who was my friend, but it was an open seat. That was the time to run, so I ran. She won. I came in third. It was really a pro-life, pro-choice back in the 90s when it was real. And her and I were both pro-choice, but there was a conservative that was pro-life. And the fear was that me being in the race was going to cost her the election. But we went through it. She won, and she was a great rep, and she was tied into the mayor's office and all that stuff. So I 4 years later, the seat became open again. And I decided to run. That's the short version of. But I did decide to run, and I won handedly with the support of Labor. Now, in 1990, I had the support of Labor also, which gave me the votes that I had. But it wasn't enough because we were up against the mayor's regime, and that's fine. It was a great experience. I learned how to do it. In 94, I knew how to do it, and I did it. And I had a Republican, 2 independents, and I think I had 5 opponents in the Democratic primary. And in the primary, I believe I got 47% of the vote. We worked it. We knew how to do it. I knocked. And for anyone listening, when you want to run for state representative, your job is in the neighborhood meeting the constituents, not going to all these parties downtown and all that stuff. And that's the key. Because if you meet the people, you talk to the people, and you listen to the people will respect you. And that happened, and I got elected handedly and served 2 terms in the House. I was in my 7th term in the Senate when I was approached by Labor to run for the president of the AFL-CIO. And to be candid with you, I struggled with it because I was on a pretty good track in the Senate. And I said no at first. because I thought there'd be other qualified, capable, and I knew there'd be qualified, capable leaders that could do it. A lot of them, like Marty Walsh was one of them. He had his eyes set on being mayor. And there were other candidates that were thinking about it. So eventually I decided to do it. I think, because that's why I was elected to the legislature, to stand up and fight for working people. And now it was our dear friend John Laughlin who actually said to me, "You're up there for Labor. Labor is asking you to be the head of Labor. For them, it's a no-brainer." And the truth was, it is a no-brainer. And I believe from all my heart in the labor movement. I couldn't imagine where America would be. You take the labor movement out of our nation, and we'd be a third world nation in a decade. I mean, without rights. Corporate America has totally changed the way they do business from the 60s and even the 70s, where now they think that they're entitled to everything and that the masses we shouldn't worry about, when I totally disagree with that. I think organized labor has built the middle class, working people, like Rich Trumka used to say, wake America up and put America to bed at night. And that's what the labor movement does best. And make sure that when you retire, you have a decent pension, that you have health care, and you have respect on the job and justice on the job. And if there is an injustice, you can stand up against it without the fear of reprisal. And so that's what the labor movement meant to me. And so I decided to run for this job. And it's almost like a blink of an eye, and the 12 years is up. I've done 3 terms. And the good news is we have some great young leaders that are prepared to do the job of leading the AFL-CIO. And they have been implementing the programming for me over the last decade, 12 years. And most importantly, they are ready to be the new leaders. And so I'm willing to step down, of course, and move on to whatever else life holds for me, and be so proud of the leaders that hopefully will be elected in the convention in October.
I think that's got to be a great feeling, knowing that you trust the folks who are coming in.
It makes it a lot easier to leave. Yes, it really does. And I do trust them. I mean, look, they're not going to do everything I would do. They're different people, just like I didn't do everything my predecessor was doing. But the most important thing is they are committed to the trade union movement, as I am. I see it. They have lived it. So then from there, the 12 years in the AFL-CIO, there were lots of accomplishments.
Tell me about some of your most significant accomplishments, in your personal opinion.
Well, you know what, truly, that's a good question. And I think it's really important just to say at the beginning that these accomplishments are not Steven Tolman's. These accomplishments are the AFL-CIO, because we are a broad coalition, 750 affiliates, and really like the 60 major unions in the nation. And so working together with all of them, I mean, I remember when I was first elected, we had a Republican U.S. Senator here, Scott Brown. I served with him in the House. You know, he was misleading people until we were able to. People thought, oh, he's a great guy. He cares about workers, because he was a good state senator and never out of line. He would support anything I was moving as a colleague of mine. But when he went to Washington, then he had the evil empire of the Republican corporate Senate. And they were forcing him. I think he voted in a very difficult time in like 8 or 9 when the economy had collapsed. He voted at least 12 to 20 times not to extend unemployment benefits to working families. And we were able to expose that and educate all of our colleagues in our affiliates that this guy wasn't out for us. And we beat him with Elizabeth Warren. We got this candidate who was totally unknown. She was a firebrand. She wasn't afraid of anybody, and she believed in standing up when she saw an injustice. And that was a great victory for us. He was a colleague of mine. It was a little difficult and uncomfortable at times, but I had never a second thought about supporting her. And since, she's been a great leader. And then on the heels of that, we have Marty Walsh running for mayor. And Marty Walsh was not supposed to win that, but organized labor was united. I'm talking about united at one night in Hyde Park, Massachusetts, we had 317 brothers and sisters show up to go door knocking for Marty Walsh in Hyde Park. Think of that. And the other main candidate was funded by the people who want to support charter schools. And really, that's an attack. Charter schools, we have a public school system. If it's not working, fix it. Don't try to create an alternative candidates or alternative option, but not have a union, because that's just not the way to go. There's no accountability in it. So we had two great wins with Elizabeth Warren and Marty Walsh. It didn't get us overconfident, though. We didn't get a big head or anything else. Legislatively, whether we got, getting the earned sick time bill done or the domestic workers bill of rights, and, most importantly, with the Republican governor who was pushing that expansion of charter schools, beating him back, I think that was in 2016, or when the same governor was going after to privatize the tea, not funding it. They got to put all the debt on it, and then you want to privatize it and break it up. We stood up against him. We united the public sector task force on the MBTA, and we were organized and ready when he tried to justify tearing it apart, and we held that. At one point, he wanted to get rid of all the garages and contract out everything. So organized labor stood together, and we're excited about that. Whether it's working with the central labor councils or taking the ones that weren't working and putting out developing an area labor federation, which was a pilot. And there's pros and cons, but we're pleased with what we see. Obviously, all the different ballot initiatives that we were working from. The driver's license bill, when they tried to repeal, they passed the law. We got the law passed. They tried to repeal it with the ballot initiative. Working with our partners in the community, we stood up against that. And most importantly, we got the corner office back finally, and we got, Maura Healey, who's our Attorney General. A lot of us had relationships with her, and, we won't probably agree on everything, but when it comes to having somebody competent, willing to stand up, we are proud to say that we got Maura Healey elected governor, and that's exciting. And then, of course, just everyday actions of standing up, working together, finding new challenges. It's exciting. It's been very, very good. Now, one of the big transitions we have is we know that gas is going to be diminishing, and more importantly, there's going to be a transition to more electricity, and we have to make sure that those jobs as we transition are going to be good jobs, sustainable jobs, family sustainable jobs with pensions and health care, and they're not going to be handed to us. As A. Philip Randolph said, freedom is never given, it is won. And if we are not going to be willing to fight for the dignity of these jobs, these new created green jobs, so to speak, then we're going to end up with something like you have at Cablevision, where all of the repair analysts are not union, and it's very hard then to organize them. So we're trying to get in on the ground level and make sure that our new green economy is going to be family sustaining jobs.
I definitely want to go a little bit into some of those issues you advocated for.
I remember one of the most significant challenges was early on the domestic workers bill. The domestic workers in Massachusetts, everyone thinks we have great laws on the books. Well, let me tell you, we didn't for domestic workers. They were almost like indentured servants, and they didn't have any rights, and they had no ability to be able to stand up against an injustice in the household or the people they were working. And we were informed of that, and it was Alicia Tracy. She was head of the Brazilian community group. Just think about it. She was in Brazil. A prominent person said, you come to America, I'll make sure you get all your schooling, and I will take care of you like my own daughter. She comes up and she goes to Newton. She's put on a 3-season porch with no heat, and it wasn't 8 hours, and there wasn't education afforded. She was totally misled to what she was in for. But once you're here, then how do you get out of it? So now the domestic workers bill, under the leadership, Mike Moran, I think, chaired that for us, and his mom was an Irish domestic worker. He understood the depth of it. We were able to get that bill passed. organized labor, standing with the community, standing with the immigrants who were being mistreated. And that says something. That was one of our first big victories that we were all so proud of.
And I'd also love to ask you a little bit about your work when it pertains to the gig economy.
When I mentioned earlier about what the computer had done to the railroad jobs, well, with the app-based companies are coming in and they're violating our laws right here. You know, the gig economy, it used to be a musician had a gig where they played 3 hours and they got paid. And that's what you'd call I got a gig. But it seems today that real secure at one time jobs are being turned into gig type jobs with no benefits, no dignity, no justice. If you're classified as a non-employee, you don't get workers' comp, unemployment insurance. You don't get wage and hour laws. You're not under that because you're an independent contractor, so you set a contract. And to some people, that might be an advantage, but really to America, it's a disgrace that these corporations are misleading the general public by saying they want flexibility in benefits when we could have flexibility in benefits and still have dignity on the job. We could have flexibility in benefits and still be a 40-hour work week. There's no standard that prohibits that, but they say they need to be an independent contractor to have this successful business plan. Well, the Attorney General is suing them. It's 3.5 years practically now. They've tied up the court case. These corporations will spend $225 million. That's $250 million in California in 2020, in the height of the pandemic, to mislead the Californians into believing that we should adopt this concept of independent contractor. That creates a whole class of citizens who are without benefits, without pensions, without dignity, without civil rights. It's unacceptable, but yet they spent that money and fooled everybody. They threatened us here in Massachusetts to the last 2 years, and I'm very proud of the Massachusetts AFL-CIO Executive Board and a couple of other foundations, but together we raised $1.6 million, challenged their inappropriate ballot initiative. I mean, it basically set a concept of app-based transportation companies. The drivers will be independent contractors, not an employee and not an agent. Now, nobody in the world, unless you're a lawyer, would know what that meant. Not an employee exempts you from all the dignity on the job. You're on your own now. You have no workers' comp, unemployment insurance, no access to it. You are an independent contractor and you get nothing but the hourly wage that you've agreed upon. Agent, when we studied it, we found out that not an agent would mean that if there's a tragic accident or any accountability or liability that is inappropriate, we can't sue the master company. Uber or Lyft, they're not sued. It's only the liability would only sit with the driver of the automobile. And that is bad. We challenged this with the AG, and then we took it to court, and the Supreme Judicial Court in Massachusetts, 7 Republican-appointed judges voted unanimously to oppose this ballot initiative that was being pushed by these app-based companies. And in it, they used words that were very powerful that basically accused these companies of exactly what they were doing is inappropriately misleading the public. And it basically said that in obscure, they use good words like flexibility benefits, which everybody would like, but in obscure language hitting away, there were things that if people knew about and understood them, they would absolutely not be interested in voting that way. But they had them hidden away, deceptive. Corporate America with billions of dollars being deceptive to the public and not in a good way. Taking away benefits, taking away hundreds of years or 100 and some odd years of workers' rights and laws on the books, which are there to protect communities and public safety. And these corporations don't care about any of that. It's selfish, greedy corporations who are willing to mislead the public And yes, I am very upset because that fight's not over and I'm leaving before it's over. But once again, we have a great dedicated staff that is totally abreast of this, and I know they're willing to continue the fight.
I'm kind of curious about the idea of coalition building and what is the importance of coalition building in this work that you've done?
We realized early on that labor can't do it alone anymore. We realized that many of the environmental groups were off running around doing their thing, but they weren't consulting labor. Or that many of our friends who might be liberal Democrats, they go about their business and they think that they're, appropriate to society, but they're forgetting the labor movement struggles. And it seems like a lot of the blue Democrats have forgotten the concept of what the trade union movement did when they built the middle class and allowed people to get beyond the middle class because of standards. And it seems somewhere along the line, labor can't do it alone. We have to be involved with our communities. And like Freddie Kroll said, we have to be involved in our churches. We have to be involved in our schools. And most importantly, our labor councils. And that's the key ingredient to our success. Individual unions are not strong enough because corporate money, look at the court decisions that have said the corporations can spend as much money as they want. Well, guess what? They're doing it. And they're not having good results for the citizens of our nation. They're taking rights away. And that is unacceptable. And so I really, really believe that if the AFL-CIO or the organized labor wasn't united and working together with our community partners, with our different organizations. We have an Asian group, we have a Chinese group, we have the A. Philip Randolph. We're going to get the Coalition of Black Trade Unionists as well as gay and lesbian. There's a name, but it's changed a few times who represent them on our board. And these board members are very important to be at our table when we are discussing issues. And so we know we need to work together with all of them. Not always agree, because several times we have disagreements, but what organized labor has to be aware of is that you can disagree, but it doesn't have to be fatal. You understand? Because we have a very broad agenda. And I know that we're really proud to have worked with so many minority groups in recently passing the driver's license bill for people who lack the proper documentation. And I can tell you this, that was an issue that maybe adversely will impact some of our members, but those members that even are going to be impacted realized that it was more important to support the integrity of what that bill was trying to do for people raising families, getting to school, getting to doctors, and they need to have a driver's license here in America. And so we did that. We worked with the coalition, and when we got involved, that's when the bill got passed.
As president here of the Massachusetts AFL-CIO, you've been a trustee for UMass. Can you reflect on a little bit of your time as a trustee and I think continued time as a trustee going forward?
It's busy, I can tell you that. There are some positions that you can get on, and, there's not a lot of heavy lifting. There's a lot of work to that. There's 5 campuses. They're all unionized. There's all kinds of problems at all the campuses. There are labor education centers, which are extremely important, and they're not funded properly. We're working on trying to get them more funding. And that gets into the real concept of the land grant. And so that's a piece that is extremely important because we have done so much for the public universities, we then have a mission that it grows out of these labor councils of being able to work together with different groups and challenge things that we see where there's problems. But they're not funded. So that's one of the things we really would like to get more funding for the different coalitions that are in each of the universities. But there's so much involved. I've been involved in hiring the chancellor at UMass Boston, UMass Dartmouth, and actually UMass Lowell, actually in Amherst, as I think about it. So, and it's very time-consuming. It's a lot of work, but it's our public university. I'm a graduate of UMass Boston. I was well in my 30s when I finally finished, but I finished. And if that wasn't there, I probably wouldn't have a college education. So I realize how important these public universities are, and I'm honored to serve. And I will say that I think the president, who was a former congressman, Marty Meehan, is doing a very good job. And I can say that having worked with him. I mean, just the fact that if I look at our four chancellors that I just mentioned, each and every one of them is like a gold mine to the university. They offer a lot of different unique talent and leadership.
This podcast is coming out of the UMass Dartmouth Labor Education Center. And so in terms of the work that they're doing down there, can you reflect or give any feedback on how that Labor Education Center is doing?
Well, from the Dubin Center, I mean, the Dubin Center is legendary. As I think about it, though, so many of the people who I knew from the Dubin Center were older than me, and they're gone. I mean, but there's a younger tradition coming in. I mean, I've talked to so many different union members down in Dartmouth who are totally committed to the mission because of the education that they get through the labor centers. And one of the things we're trying to do is tie them a little bit more together. And you could do that if you had more funds. I mean, you need to have more funds for these labor centers because their mission is simply America's mission. They're trying to find ways to be better at the way we do things, and you have to fund that. And it's a good investment, though. So particularly, I'm trying to think of some of the things. I mean, obviously, when we were doing the chancellor, although they didn't vote with the chancellor, I did vote for the chancellor down there, and I think he's doing a great job in Dartmouth. And that's AFT. The others are different unions. That's a American Federation of Teachers rather than MTA, which is, I think, at all the other campuses. But they're totally committed. They're totally dedicated. And I think that the Chancellor, Mark Fuller, really wants to lift up Dartmouth a little more and bring it to where it should be. And not to say that it isn't. My son was down there for a while, and he enjoyed it very much. I know that.
And why is an education in labor from such a young age important?
Well, those who don't know the past are doomed to repeat it. Let's face it. I mean, that's the concept about, we can say, for genocide in so many countries around the world. But more importantly, organized labor in America has not always been at the forefront of accomplishments. Okay? The labor movement are the folks that brought you the weekend. The folks that challenged child labor, the folks that brought you the pensions. Of course, that's gone by the wayside because of corporate America and trying to get out of their liability there. But that's where we have to fight harder and be more united to be able to address it. My generation now that I'm retiring, I have a pension and I will have a pension. The generation coming up will have a 401k, and we all know, we've seen it 2 or 3 times where it dips down to practically nothing. And if you don't have a heart attack and die when you see all your funding is gone, and now it does come back in time, and they say that that's the way it works. But when you have a defined benefit pension, you're not living by what's happening on the stock market, or your investments aren't fragile. You have that defined benefit pension, and it's yours for your retirement because you've earned it. And that's a lot better. 401ks were determined to supplement that pension. It seems like once they got us to believe that 401ks are important, they wanted to say that that's what you get instead of a pension. And that's a big problem.
And what is your hope for this future generation, for this sort of like new labor movement that's happening now with young people?
The world is changing, and it's changing rapidly. I mean, they're going to be facing artificial intelligence attacking us. And my fear, a big fear, is that artificial intelligence, everybody says MIT's doing it, Boston University's doing it. Then they say other colleges that we don't even know are doing artificial intelligence. But there's no police involved. There's no guidance. There's no oversight. There's nobody saying that you must have ethics and standards in artificial intelligence. And that, then, unfortunately, it can be used in devious ways, as we see the big tech is doing it. They're misleading people purposely in order to get them not to have to pay obligations that every other business pays. So if artificial intelligence, although it's adopted and designed and probably created in universities, is there standards? Is there ethics involved in it? And it should be designed to help our citizens, to help our communities. It should not be to engage in more profit for those that don't need it. And that's what my fear is that we create more of a rift in income inequality when we should be going the other way.
You're retiring soon. What gives you the most satisfaction from your work, reflecting back?
I think when you help people, you always feel like you're doing right. I mean, we may not be successful in all of our endeavors, but when we see an injustice, we don't sit around. We stand up against it. That's not me. That's our movement. That's who we are. That's why we have labor councils to discuss electing good people to represent us rather than people that don't give a damn about working people. And there's too many of them up there that don't. But you know what? That's our job. And if we see people, we now have a vehicle to be able to address it if people aren't standing up for us. We give it our best. In all the efforts against injustice, we stand up against it, we give it our best, and hopefully are successful. But from that, you get satisfaction. Sometimes you almost feel like you're never fulfilled because as soon as you finish something, you got another thing on your plate or 10 other things on your plate. Or it could be anything. But I can say it never was like I was going to work in doing something I didn't like. I liked what I was doing. In the legislature, I was able to fight for things I thought about. I liked that were important to working families. And in this job, we had to take on everybody's problems, you know what I mean? Because you're the umbrella organization. And I can say it was rewarding, just fighting and learning about how you can struggle and how you can change a struggle and turn it into something that means something for people and get better benefits. So fulfilling our mission, which is protecting the middle class, standing up against injustice, that's fulfilling in itself.
And how do you plan on spending retirement? My
goodness. I mean, you know what? 52 years. It's 52 years that I've been working. And I'm looking forward to having some free time. I'm sure, and as everybody has cautioned me, give me a week or 3 weeks, and I'm going to be itchy, and I'm going to be saying I want to do something. But when I guess I'll cross that bridge when I get to it. But I'm looking forward to being retired and not having to, be running 100 miles an hour. I mean, I would kind of like that. I think I like, don't get me wrong, I have no complaints about this job. I've absolutely loved it. But I don't think I would want to do it for another 4 years as a term. I can say that I'm ready to say, I got great leadership here. I got people that are in the AFL-CIO that believe as passionately as I do about this organization. And they're ready to lead.
And did I hear you have some new grandchildren? Was that right?
I got pictures now. Let me show you some pictures. For all of you out there, they are the most beautiful 2 grandchildren. My youngest daughter, Siobhan, had a boy and a girl 6 weeks early, so they were due July 10th, but she had them on May 28th. And they were in the NICU. They came home on Juneteenth. So June 19th was the date they came home, and they're thriving. They're doing wonderful. And it's just, it's a whole new world because they can come and you can spoil them and then they go home. But I'm kidding. I mean, it is special. But, and hopefully my other children, all 3 of my children got married within the last couple of years very quickly, and they all seem happy, and we'll see that maybe there'll be some more, but it's a new life.
So maybe they'll keep you busy. And
yes, they will. I mean, the truth is we're going to be taking care of them tonight, and it's like there's nothing better. You know what I mean? Like you just shut out life, and hey, I got this little bundle of joy in my arms, and guess what? Or 2 bundles of joy in my arms. There's one thing better, right? What's better than one bundle of joy? Two bundles of joy. So yeah, we're excited. We are very excited. And that's life. That's kind of like when you look at that, the beautiful babies and their little nails and their ankles, and they're so little and so fragile and so beautiful. That's the meaning of life. And that child should grow up with integrity and dignity, and most importantly, have rights. And it seems there's a great big dark cloud out there that wants to take the rights away, all in the name of greed. But I can say this: organized labor will not allow that. We will stand up against it and we will fight it.
Steve's last day in office was October 13th. He's succeeded by Chrissy Lynch, former Chief of Staff and Secretary-Treasurer for the Massachusetts AFL-CIO. This podcast was made possible by UMass Dartmouth's Arnold M. Dubin Labor Education Center, with special help from Jim Snow. I'm Elena Eberwein. Thanks for tuning in.